The gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Crockett, is recognized for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been such an eye-opening day for me, especially someone who has practiced criminal defense law for almost 2 decades in multiple states as well as federal courts. So let's talk about the fact that we are here today hearing lots about scare tactics and not anything about solutions. So very quickly, there was mention of a Police in Pursuit Act. I believe that's what you called it. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you took issue with that, correct?
One of the things, yes.
That was one of the things. And just to be clear, I've not read this act, but I'm curious. I would imagine that that was something that talked about when you should pursue someone who potentially has committed a crime. And it most likely was a bill of some sort that was actually about public safety, making sure that law enforcement or say someone who was in pursuit, hot pursuit, did not kill innocent bystanders. That's my guess. I'm telling you, I've not read it. Can you correct me if I'm wrong?
It prevented vehicle pursuits so that we wouldn't be able to chase criminals. That's what it did.
And for some reason, you felt like that was a bad idea. Let me be clear. I also did civil rights work. There's a 15-year-old Jordan Edwards that was killed by law enforcement in Dallas. It was the first officer that was convicted of murder in almost 30 years on duty. He shot at a vehicle because he felt like they were fleeing with an AR-15 and killed that 15-year-old child. And while we're talking about convictions, while he was convicted, unfortunately, the way things are set up in D.C., qualified immunity while we're going through a civil suit is still something that they are believing should cloak this officer. But I'm going to move on to some other issues. We talk, or at least my colleagues on the other aisle, are consistently talking about how they want to prevent crime and how they have issues with criminals. But for some reason, the majority of the media and the country is sitting around waiting on multiple indictments for the twice impeached former president. And I haven't really heard any of them say anything against Trump and the allegations. So when we talk about crime in D.C., because I'm getting there with it, right? When we talk about crime in D.C., let's talk about what happened on January 6th. If we're going to talk about violent criminals, let's talk about the fact that the person that was occupying the White House is the one that caused an insurrection. And we had well over 1,000 folks so far that have been arrested. And that was here. I'm sure that that's affecting the numbers for crime in D.C. when we're looking at that overall number. Any councilman, can you help me out? Do those numbers factor into y'all's numbers? The insurrectionist?
If there are arrests were made, that would show up in the MPD reporting data, if that's what you mean.
Okay, yes, sir. Okay, thank you very much. In fact, you know, it seems like they want to be so hard on crime because they're saying we need to make sure we increase penalties. We've been doing that for a long time in this country. And for some reason, the United States leads in incarcerated, but we also lead in gun crimes. I know somebody didn't want to talk about gun crimes, but that's what they are. That's what happened in Tennessee. Just to be clear, we had a gun crime in Tennessee. I am from Texas. Unfortunately, we have lots of gun crimes that happen there. And these state legislatures, as we talk about if you could bring somebody in and legislate for them, they continually give out more guns, which law enforcement testified, at least in my state of Texas, and said that that would make the streets less safe. Nevertheless, I digress. So this is the party that says that they care about making sure criminals stay locked behind bars. But we went on a little field trip on Friday, led by one of my Republican colleagues, to check on the insurrectionists and make sure their tablets were working just fine. I don't really understand why we're playing this game. The reality is that the Republicans talk a lot. They talk a big game, but I need people to pay attention to what the Republicans do. And when it comes to lawlessness, they are all for it so long as it's one of their little friends. But when it comes down to black and brown, which we've already talked about, the city of D.C. having so many black folk, there is a problem. Now, councilmen, I'm sure you've had an election since the institution of some of these policies. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
And they reelected you, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I was just reelected a couple of months ago.
Okay. So seemingly your constituents are good with you, right?
I didn't even have an opponent.
Okay. All right. So I'm from Texas. So your people can't vote for me. But for some reason, people think that it makes sense that I should be running your city. I'm just trying to make sure I understand what's going on today. Thank you so much. With that, I'll yield back.